Pardon me, having my iced coffee with organic whipped cream. Okay, so if I'm ever gonna have my own free will, if I'm gonna watch a movie or show in the evening, which I almost always want to do, there's sort of like a grim march forward toward progress. Like I'm going through a bunch of directors' full works or their notable works, or watching a show with like a serial narrative, or something where I always feel like I'm kind of putting something off a checklist and watching them. This kind of like builds and is larger than just an individual episode. Like there's always kind of like a purposeful fashion to all of it. But when you live with a woman, you start to realize, like, especially with, I don't know, namely with mine, if you look at what things they're sort of attracted to on a show, or what things they even look for in like a thumbnail of a show they don't know, like if they're scrolling through a streaming service, it's gonna be more it's gonna be more like girls in a thumbnail. It's gonna be a little more fun. It's gonna be a little more frivolous. It's not gonna be like a critical masterpiece or something. So you have to balance that a little bit, and I very much don't want to be a couple where we just throw on some horrible reality show in the evening, and then we joke and talk about how horrible the people are, how horrible the show is. I don't love that, because I kind of feel like I'm trying to learn a bunch of stuff, and that's not necessarily, to me, the way I want to relax. So, to find a balance of I want to do like the heavier things. They're going to be often cop dramas or something that's a thriller, with something that is more appealing to someone else. It's kind of hard to find those balances. So one thing that's been a real revelation lately, I was obviously aware of the show, but hadn't seen it yet, was the White Lotus. And the reason the White Lotus to me seems so good at this is that it is like soapy, entertaining, funny, but also poignant, and I think a show that is like very of the moment to some degree. I looked at the guy. I don't know. He's like 45 or 50 or whatever. However old Mike White is. He was formerly a Survivor, but and then a friend of mine told me that like part of like the impetus behind the show was to kind of have an angle where it's like rich people don't suffer consequences, but the show is a very good combination of like escapism and fun, and like sort of like a dark comedy that like actually hits some like slice of life moments really well. Um, it's enviable, it's escapist, but the people are also awful, so you can gawk at them. But below that, there is like a really intelligent acknowledgement of the sort of central difficulty of people and how you can't really define people as just good or bad. And also, like, there's some moments where he kind of, especially in the third season, I think, where he kind of hits on like parts of society at this point that I don't that comes off as causes a criticism, but in a way where he buys into it wholly. And so you can see the ways that over the three seasons he sort of learns from what has worked and what hasn't. Um, you want to have a cast that's fairly well known. It seems like it's almost in the contract. These people have to have like sub 8% body fat. But each season is in a place that is very visually beautiful. And for this guy, I don't know if you've ever done. I don't know what else this guy has done. I've been trying to purposely stay a little bit ignorant and not learn what other stuff he's directed. But there's like real moments of visual flair, especially in the third. By the third season, like these little artistic twists of like showing and incorporating the nature of the area they're going as the beginning framing for each scene. Like you can basically just do this for the love of the game. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to like the shots of the surf have like a Buddhist implication, or the like I don't know, like the scenes of the primates of the jungle. They don't have to have like a larger like influence of framing how the scene should be looked at or the whole season should be looked at. But it is basically just like something that's kind of forgotten, I think, in movies forever, is just things like that just sort of make it better to watch. It's as simple as that, and it kind of helps to have a little flair into this to give a little energy to what you're doing. And there are different sort of feels to each season. I would argue that the first one still probably felt like the best to me, in that it's shorter, it's tighter, and there's like just basically this like avalanche of insanity centered on Armand, the hotel manager, who is so good. Where just things are just kind of completely going to hell, and you're just watching it happen. It's almost like I don't know. It's almost like operatic or something. How crazy things are getting. The second season to me felt a little grimmer. Um, and even from like the beginning of it, you're like, it's just like there's less fun to it. One thing that it does do, which I think is like an interesting, if intended or not, kind of like an interesting to me interpretation of like what the world's like now, is that not only are we all essentially, not only is like our society sex obsessed, it's also kind of obsessed with shaming, and that like you can have the entire season about sex, but there's like all these ways that I think it's probably pretty easy for a lot of people to be like, oh, this is awful. Like Theo James and Megan Fahey, what a terrible couple. Like they don't care about the news, and he's a philanderer, and Megan Fahey has this amazing scene. Well, they do it twice, so it's less effective the second time. But there's this amazing scene where Megan Fahey is speaking to Aubrey Plaza, where she sort of acknowledges what her husband is like, but also like talks about how like this is kind of the price she pays for the life she has, and she's sort of teary-eyed and brave and sad and sort of wistful at the same time, and she does an amazing job at that, like really really good. um but they sort of invite you to like shame them for being awful. The other couple has their sense of sexual hangups, but their sexual hangups get sort of cured by the end by an indiscretion on the part of one of theirs, or maybe both of theirs, depends how you look at it. And it kind of makes me think about how um, sometimes we have a very narrow kind of view of what's right, and people who are outside of it are wrong. But there's a lot of people and there's a lot of couples who are kind of just coping and making it work regardless. And that sort of like diversity of experience is probably better than being like, oh my god, these people are awful. It's fine. What they do is not that bad in the grand scheme of things, if you know what I mean. So by the time they came to the third season, I think that they had learned that, okay, we need a more high profile cast. Jason Isaacs, Sam Rockwell, um, I don't know, Patrick Schwarzenegger to some degree, Michelle Monaghan. There's a lot of people who and La Lisa, who I didn't even know was okay. So there's like they kind of learned by the third season to be a little more evocative, to be a little more fun, and to like bump up the Walton Goggins, his like amazing British naive angel girlfriend. There's a lot bigger profile to the third one, and it probably is the second strongest, largely for that reason. And there's a couple of points that I find really interesting about not only that season, but about the show in general. Um, there is, as a side note, Patrick Schwarzenegger, I feel like completely. He has so many lines and so much time in the third season, and I don't think he's necessarily even remotely important to the ending, but he gets so much time during the season. And this is another person who's like, oh yeah, this guy is a douchebag. But hey, I don't know. Everyone sort of has like their points of weakness and strength in it. And I think it's a good show for showing that it's not necessarily that some people are awful and some people are good. I know I'm kind of hammering down that point a little bit, but like a lot of people, the guy who wrote this is very very good at giving people difficulties and redeeming qualities at once, and it sort of gets to like that essential difficulty of like just dealing with people in life, that there's things you can simultaneously or right after each other sequentially like and really dislike something about someone, and this is true of almost everyone you know in your entire life, and it's never so easy. But there are a couple of moments. They also brought back Belinda in the third season, who is like probably one of the best and most human real characters in the show. And for better or for worse, by the end of the third season, the things that are real and human, sort of glum, depressing, but warm and alive about Belinda, are also sort of the things that he most skewers. It almost, to me, feels like the ending of the show, the very, very, very legit ending of the season, and what happens with her and how it is framed, seems to me to be some sort of larger comment, which I think is ultimately, sadly, quite true about most people's perspective on the world now, is that it doesn't really matter what you do, as long as you are set for life financially by the end of it, you have made the right decision. And there's a whimsy, not necessarily to reward her, but is essentially what seems to be a commentary on the world and the show, about how it ends, the song playing, her boating off, and she makes morally a terrible decision, but you get paid for it, and so cut all ties, abandon anything useful and helpful happening in your life, and just to go enjoy your money. And I think this is a larger commentary, and I think sort of like uh, a gem handled knife in the gut ending of the show where it's like even the nicest character can be spoiled, and they're not essentially wrong. This is something I think about a lot, and there's sort of a reality of our culture where there's nothing anyone can really say about you if you're paid. And you can be like, oh my god, Jeff Bezos paid more taxes, but the person saying that is mostly saying that from a position of making barely enough to make a lower middle class life. This is typically the people who are going to be the most online about these things. And so outside of like our withering hatred of billionaires for fair reasons mostly, um, uh, you can't really say anything to someone, and people are kind of above criticism if they are set or if they are doing very, very well. And the show, I think, speaks to that very well. And in terms of other things I wanted to sort of tickle before this goes too long, is I'm surprised what happens to Tanya. The show is very beautiful. There's a lot of like real cinematic flair moments. I like the international twist to the third one. And if you pay attention to the ending of the third one as well, like everyone just kind of skates off with a few exceptions. But even like these very, very terrible people are shown to be like celebrating and relaxed and totally unfazed after like a pretty wild ending. And this is purposeful. I think people could be kind of confused about it, but I think it's not that it's like why didn't they wrap up these storylines? It's mostly that like it's just these things don't really matter to these people and they're going to sort of continue. So I do think there's an especially bold moment to finish the third season that's a larger commentary that wasn't necessarily attempted in the previous seasons. I also think that the woman who plays Chelsea grew on me to such an impossible degree over the course of the third season, from being like, oh, she's quite weird looking, kind of annoying, but like a very like warm, big eyed, sort of like naturalistic person by the end of it, where you have a real sense of like understanding the person or the actress or the performance or the role very, very well. And she grew on me to such an incredible degree by the end of it. And you think about the things that she said over the course of the season, so you sort of start to feel like a concern for her near the end. So that's essentially it. This is a show that is very, very of the moment in society. I was honestly surprised that the writer wasn't someone younger. It's like the Sam Rockwell like autogynephilia speech. Just like these wild moments, but to have at its core something that speaks to like the essential youthfulness of our entertainment culture while also getting like deeper moments of like the central difficulties of dealing with people and the winner takes all nature of our economic system. That might seem like it's kind of overthinking it, but I think it hits those points better than most shows, which are trying to keep a tight story without getting to any sort of larger point. So I think these are the reasons why it's a success, and these are the reasons why at multiple levels this works as a larger hit for HBO, as it can sort of speak at different levels to different people. For some people, it can be aghast at the scandal of how some of the characters have shaky morals. Some people like how beautiful a lot of the characters and a lot of the scenario is. But there is more there. This is like a larger, sharper critique, especially in the third season, to some degree in each season, that I was very impressed by, generally speaking. All right, bye.